use the word service, it means value co-creation. And we think there's a relationship to the concept of consonance and resonance in viable systems approach. Science, just for our purposes here today, is a method to answer questions through empirical studies. And we want to understand the relationship of system science, which studies all systems, to service science, which studies these value co-creation systems. And also understand, the reason I'm here today, is to better understand the relationship to viable systems. The fundamental questions are, how did the service systems that we see in the world today, how did they get here? And where do we go in the future? How do we predict, control, and invest to improve? And more, it seems like, recover from crises. Hurricane Katrina hitting New Orleans is a crisis. The Haitian earthquake is a crisis. The air service systems weren't very good to begin with. But how do we recover from crises more? So let's talk about value co-creation. This rather complex diagram, and I agree it's complex, talks about value co-creation. If you've got a customer and you've got a provider, when they start sharing resources to do something together, let's say you're a rental car company and I need a rental car. I'm not buying the car, I've got a shared access to that resource. Then you can start co-creating value. So our definition of service as value co-creation is when two entities interact and the two are capable about reasoning about the value of the other entity. And if these two entities interact, it can be, we know from game theory, it can be win-win, that's value co-creation, or it can be these other outcomes which aren't so good. So what we're looking at here is really how do these service system entities share resources for the purpose of value co-creation. Now, I'm not going to go through this so much, but for those who are interested in the philosophical foundations, there's a little bit here on how we view the science of service science evolving. I guess one important point that's worth thinking about is all of these take an evolutionary perspective. So our view of service science is like, in a way, like biology. There's organisms, biological organisms that have evolved over time, have increasing complexity, complex structure. Our service systems, as they evolve over time, increase the complexity of their structure, and they become more interconnected. This book right here by Herb Simon. Herb Simon, by the way, how many know who Herb Simon is? He's dead now, so people don't know about him as much as they should. He won the Nobel Prize in economics. That's why you should know him, right? So he won the Nobel Prize in economics. He also started the field of artificial intelligence. He also started the field of cognitive science. Herb Simon was the first service scientist. We just didn't know how to call him a service scientist. He was multidisciplinary. He was brilliant. And this book, which was the last book he did before he died, actually laid out, I think, a pretty good model for, he didn't call it service science, he called it the sciences of the artificial. But a lot of the multidisciplinary character of design, social planning, complexity, and architecture is covered in this book. So if you really are interested in the philosophical foundations of service science, this is a must-read. And again, he's a Nobel Prize winner in economics, so I think for economists it's a good read. So here's the evolutionary perspective that we take when we relate service science to system science. System science is all of these systems. It's physical systems, it's chemical systems, it's biological systems of unicell and multicell. It's biological systems of the complexity of, species that have social structure. But as you go up, right, so this is time, getting more complex. As you go up, you get into a gray area, which is early anthropology, early people. They're out there using primitive technology, primitive specialization of tasks. So these are what we call informal service systems. At some point, more recently in history, people start using money and people start using laws to help value co-creation happen more effectively. It's hard to do value co-creation when you don't have money. And it's harder if you don't have laws. So laws, the evolution of money and laws is critical to getting to the stage of formal service systems. Today, the world we live in is becoming globally interconnected. That's why selling bad mortgages in the US can bring down the whole global economy. It's because we're globally interconnected. So this evolution of systems here, hierarchical complexity, system science studies it all. Service science just studies the value co-creation aspects of these systems as they're evolving. How are we getting better and better at value co-creation? Recently I heard a talk, it's on one of our IBM websites, by the president of the Mayo Clinic. The Mayo Clinic is one of the best healthcare places in the world. And here's the president of the Mayo Clinic saying, number one, we need a science of service, a science of service delivery, because what we got right now in healthcare is broken. It's stupid. It's like the world before the invention of money. And what he's saying is, healthcare, we pay people when you're sick and in the hospital. If you're healthy, your doctor doesn't get any money. So he's saying, look, we should be paying people to keep us healthy. It should be when at least in the US, it's different here in Italy, so this example may not have the force here. But in the US, you're paying when you're sick. And what if you're sick and you don't have the money to pay? Well, you stay sick. So he's basically saying, even up here, even as sophisticated as we are today, our service systems are broken. So, how many entities to study? We have all of these different types of service systems, about 10 billion in the world. This is our framework for thinking about service systems. We see an ecology of different service system entities interacting to co-create value. The primary ways they interact are through value propositions and governance mechanisms. The value propositions are created out of access rights to resources and measures to different stakeholders. There are 4 types of resources in the world: people, technology, information, and organizations. There are 4 types of stakeholders: customers, providers, authorities, and competitors. We measure in service science quality, productivity, compliance, and sustainable innovation. And we have access rights. We can own things. Professor Borelli owns that watch, I'm sure. We can lease things, like the hotel room that I'm staying in. I don't own it, but I'm using it. We have shared access to things, like the air in this room, the roads. And we have privileged access to things that no one else can gain access to. So these are the fundamental attributes of service systems. If you look at service system entities, they're constantly changing over time because they're making an investment decision. How much of my resources do I use to just do what I know how to do over and over and over again? That's run. How much of my resources do I use to transform myself? I look at another service system and say, boy, you know, they're doing healthcare actually better in Italy than we are in the US in some ways. Maybe we should transform. Or how much do we invest in innovation? So every service system entity, every business, every country, every hospital, every university is making these investment decisions. And oh, by the way, some of you will notice this is just exploration and exploitation of James March, because every service system is a learning system.